Hello and welcome to the Blue Wave Pod. My name's Eric Heffinger.
And I'm Soham Manik.
In our first episode, we talked to Ken Harbaugh, who is the Democratic candidate in the Ohio 7th District. But in these next two episodes, we're going to talk to the voters of this area.
Yeah, we're going to take a bit of a different tack, and instead of talking to, politicos and activists, we just wanted to talk to two regular voters who feel pretty strongly about their positions, but I wouldn't say that they're heavily involved in politics.
No, not at all. But they trust us because we've known them forever.
And they were easy to book for that reason.
They're our friends.
So the first one is with Brandon Peery, who is, as we just said, one of our good friends. He now considers himself even more liberal than Bernie, but I think when we were growing up, he was always kind of the liberal odd child where we were.
I think so. And then DJ, on the other hand, is a member of the military and is very religious. And he uses that to decide his votes.
Yeah, and one thing to mention right at the front is we went into both of these conversations not to be confrontational, not to really enter into a debate about issues or policy, but really just to understand where both voters are coming from, why they make decisions the way they do, and the principles behind them.
We want to understand them, and we think that's missing out in today's conversations. We feel like people are talking over each other. So instead, we gave them a chance to talk, to let us know how they feel.
Yeah, and there may be a few points in both interviews probably where you're wondering, why didn't we jump in and sort of attack that or rebut that point? But, we really didn't want to do that. We just wanted to get their views and have conversations that we feel people don't have anymore.
So here's our interview with Brandon Peery first. And then in the next episode, we'll interview DJ Douglas.
Hope you enjoy. We're here today with Brandon Peery. Brandon, thanks for joining us.
Hey, happy to be here, guys.
Brandon, can you tell us a little bit about your story?
So I grew up in Medina County in Litchfield. So I grew up on about 3 acres. My dad worked in Cleveland as a HVAC technician in some of the hospitals down there. My mom, for a while, was a teacher, and she left her job to raise myself and my sister. So,
how many people live in Litchfield?
Not a lot.
It's not a lot.
It's very, very small. More cows than people, I like to tell people. So.
There's a llama farm out there, too.
There is a llama farm, yeah.
When I first moved to the area, I remember we were taking a bus ride, and I saw my first llama, and it was the most amazing thing. And
was it magical? Isn't it called Magical Llama Farms?
Yes, and you can ride the llamas.
That's an advertisement for them right there.
maybe if
we'd
you
like a free llama, please.
if you go talk to them, they may let you ride a llama. So
that'd be pretty amazing. I need to go back there.
And that's why people live here, right?
Yeah, it's mostly the llamas and the cows. Yeah.
So a hidden secret. Well, when did you leave?
So when I graduated from high school, I basically there were 2 schools that I was accepted to. I didn't really apply to all that many. My ideal school was Syracuse up in upstate New York. I just fell in love with the campus when I toured up there. All of the degree programs that I was kind of interested in at the time, they offered. And then obviously anybody that grows up in Ohio, want to go to Ohio State because all your friends are going there too. Right. So, but it was funny because it cost me less to go out of state to Syracuse than it did to go in state to Ohio State. So that was kind of the deciding factor.
And all that despite its terrible basketball team.
I can't disagree with you more. Can't disagree with you more.
That was actually a lot of fun in college because I went to Georgetown. They were massive rivals. When they were in the same conference.
That was a fun time. Yeah. So,
all right. This is the political podcast. We're going to talk about politics.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So, where do you stand politically? Where do you see yourself on the extremist right, middle of the road, lefty leftism? Where do you go?
I'm pretty far left, I would say. Probably since Bernie Sanders' campaign, I've probably moved even more left on some issues, particularly as Trump has gotten in office. I think that we almost need a stronger counterbalance to a lot of the stuff that's going on the right. So,
were you always a lefty? Do you?
I always leaned left. I kind of felt in high school that my family was always kind of closet liberals. I mean, because you can't really put John Kerry signs up in your yard and expect them to stay up very long in the Ohio 7th. So. So yeah, my family's always been pretty left of the road. My mom, I'm pretty sure she was an old hippie. She went to Woodstock. I mean, she's pretty left on a lot of issues.
She went to Woodstock. I think that's just confirmed hippie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and my dad's. It's always kind of tough to get a gauge where he is politically. I don't think he's as maybe politically motivated back in his day when he idolizes Ross Perot. So I don't know if that really says a whole lot about where my dad's at politically. But
remember when he was the crazy billionaire that wanted to run?
yeah.
So many. It's hard to keep track of them all. So, did you talk politics when you were growing up with your family at all?
Not a whole lot. Not real in depth. I mean, if there was something on television, and I'd ask my parents about it, a little inquisitively, they talk a little bit about it, but it wasn't like a mainstay, and around the Thanksgiving table or anything like that. We never really.
Do you find that you've changed how much you talk about it after 2016? I mean, it seems like it's on everyone's minds, but do you feel day to day that you have more conversations, or is it just something that you get frustrated by yourself?
It's funny. I mean, I talk with my wife Tiffany a lot. She's pretty left of the road too. We line up pretty well politically, so we talk a lot at home about it. But there's almost like a fear. Where I live now, living in the Ohio 7th, politics isn't something I want to bring up. With my neighbors. Because I'm afraid. I put up a Hillary Clinton sign in my yard, and then...
Did you put up a sign in your yard?
I did not put up a sign. The guy across the street is a very, very proud Republican, had Trump signs, and every Republican running last year had signs up in his yard.
Did you think before the election, because I've heard this from a few people who were actually in the area, and they saw how many Trump signs there were and sort of the energy, and they kind of knew, it was for a shock for a lot of people that he won, but a lot of people I've talked to here sort of told me that, not a surprise if you actually looked around here.
Yeah, I think in this area, I mean, just because it's just so deeply red, I don't think it's a surprise he won out here. Some of the more toss-up districts, I'm sure that was kind of a surprise, maybe that he won. Some of those areas, but I don't think like the Ohio 7th. I don't necessarily think that was a surprise. But like I was saying, it's if you lean left of the road and you live in the Ohio 7th, you almost feel like there's not much point in trying to bring up politics. I feel like I'm not going to change the guy across the street's mind, to vote for Hillary Clinton. He's probably not going to vote for, Jim Harbaugh.
Ken Harbaugh, we got to be careful about
Harbaugh,
that.
Yeah.
Isn't Jim the football coach?
Jim's the football. It's going to be hard for him because of that, I think.
Ken Harbaugh. So
no one's voting for Jim Harbaugh.
No. So it's kind of something that I tread very lightly on, just because these are your neighbors, and the next time I get a tree down or want to put a fence up or something like that, I don't want him thinking, oh, this liberal that I live next to, I'm going to stick it to him.
Do you think your politics will stop your neighbors from actually conversing with you or being friends with you?
Not necessarily. I think it could definitely be a barrier, though. And it's something, moving into a new neighborhood, I grew up in Litchfield, it's 20 minutes away, but small towns like that, like Valley City, it's a very tight-knit community. And, I feel like all my neighbors have been very accepting and warm and welcoming. But I feel that, maybe you don't get invited to the next clam bake or something like that if, you kind of come out as an outsider. So.
And do you think that kind of feeling has hardened in recent years? Because, I
yeah.
just moved back, and I remember growing up here, used to get into huge discussions and arguments, whether it was at school or even with parents.
Right.
And it wasn't something that would, I always got invited back to people's houses and churches and got to talk to them. And it was always spirited, and everyone had their very strong positions, but it wasn't that they couldn't, eat at the dinner table after. But do you think that's changed in recent times?
I do. I think recently, just the kind of the national tone of the argument, and maybe I didn't pay attention to it as much when I was younger, but I mean, a lot of the media outlets, CNN, it's just, a constant stream of politics. Trump's doing this, Trump said that. Part of that's, Trump for kind of setting the dialogue like that and being divisive in that way. But I think it gets people thinking about it. And then, like you said before, you kind of read something and you just kind of get angry to yourself and you're just like, and you don't want to hold that against your neighbor, but you're like, well, you voted for the guy. Like, you're part of the reason why he's in office. So. So
I think I know the answer to this based on that, but I want to ask anyway. Do you feel optimistic or pessimistic about the 2018 election?
2018, I do feel optimistic, just because a lot of the outlets that I read, I'm a big reader of 538.com. I kind of like to get into the analytics of the polling and stuff like that. Statistics, I find that really interesting, and a lot of the tone with the approval ratings the way they are for Trump kind of bode a lot of positives for Democrats. Obviously, they need to pick up a lot of seats in the House to flip it.
And I suppose we've been burned on those statistics and polls in the past. I mean, it just I guess day to day, where you live, you say that you don't really see the ability to change anyone's mind. Do you think that 2018 will actually, at least in the 7th, see some kind of shift, or does it just seem impossible to?
I do. I think the 7th is going to be a hard hill to climb. But I'm a big believer in Ken. I think he's kind of got the right message. And
Jim?
I believe it's Ken. I think you're
thanks.
wrong there. Yeah.
No relation.
But I think he's kind of the right candidate to maybe flip a district like the 7th, particularly with the amount of distaste that Trump is kind of sowing. I think it's only going to help the case. I don't think you want to explicitly just run against Trump and say, well, Bob Gibbs, votes for everything, Trump wants to pass.
He does.
He does. But I don't think that's necessarily a winning strategy. But I think Ken's kind of got the whole package kind of down with his background and everything like that, a lot of people out here could take a look at him, if they're moderate Republicans, and say, a lot of the things he supports, I can be a believer in that.
But how do you bridge that divide? Because you said yourself, you don't even want to talk to your neighbors about it. You didn't even want to put out a sign in your front yard. And I'm not calling just you out. I just mean liberals in general. How do we start bridging that divide with these people and having that conversation to even introduce the idea that it's okay to vote for our candidates? They're not lunatics.
Right, yeah. I think
there are some lunatics, but not all of them.
I think
plenty more on their side.
I think it's got to be a matter of opportunity and time and place. I think if it kind of gets brought up at a cookout or something like that, and somebody's maybe talking about it a little bit, you got to start slow and say, hey, I think Ken's all right. He may have some all right ideas. Obviously I'm a big supporter of him, and I'm obviously hope he carries the campaign very far, but I'm not going to come out and say, I love this guy, he's awesome. You kind of got to start slow so people don't, brush you off right away. So
you mentioned the running against Trump thing and whether that's a good idea or not. And I'm curious about the issues that you care about, because I think a lot of times people who have our political beliefs, we get really riled up about Russia stories or sometimes gun control after a mass shooting. Healthcare, certainly.
Yep.
What do you think affects your life the most, and what do you care about the most, and sort of when this news cycle keeps turning?
I guess to kind of answer the question, I mean, some of the big reasons that I do kind of lean the way I do is a lot of Bernie Sanders' platform really kind of resonated with me. Everything from taking on big corporations and healthcare, those kind of issues were, and the direction he wanted to go with them really resonated with me.
Do you believe in litmus tests for Democratic candidates? So Bernie obviously is a big proponent of single-payer healthcare, and it's turning into this sort of, litmus test that certain candidates in certain districts need to meet. Otherwise, the Bernie core won't come out and support them.
I'm not a firm believer in necessarily one issue litmus tests. I don't think that's how you get control of the levers of power in the federal government.
But I'm going to throw out devil's advocate here. Look at the Republicans and the way they've used gun control and abortion rights to really bring out those single issue people in droves to continuously vote. I mean, do the Democrats need that? Or should they be the big umbrella party that can talk about all these politics all the time, all these different agendas all the time?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, you can kind of bang the drum the other way on abortion and gun control and try to get people to come out. But I think the Democratic base is very different from the Republican base. I think you're talking two different animals, just in kind of the thought process and what concerns them. I think there's a much larger demographic on the left that is a lot more interested in politics and are politics junkies. And I'm not saying there's no equivalent to that on the right, but I think the pool of people is a lot bigger. You look at the pool of colleges and academics and things like that, and it skews left.
Well, I think that's one of the things I know Eric and I have talked about a lot, of how it seems like when people talk about the liberal bubble, it is a problem where the Democratic Party is becoming a big city party and doesn't really have a lot to say about rural issues and fighting for those types of places. Do you actually envision a time where you can see the Democratic Party bringing that type of population in, or is it sort of, because I think if it does go down the route that you're talking about, following those very Bernie style ideas, it's going to be very hard for them to make that argument and win in places that are so red.
Yeah, I think, and this is kind of a larger idea that I've had, is that the idea of kind of a left-right spectrum may kind of be falling apart. Because I think you look at more populist candidates like Bernie, and then you kind of got Trump almost on the other side of that. That's kind of the direction that you need to be going. And maybe some of these ideas kind of meld together, and it's less of a left-right thing and more of kind of a populist message that you need to be getting out there.
If during the primary you met a Bernie voter and you were on the same page and you were supporting the same candidate, and then come to general, they went and voted for Trump, which a fair amount of Bernie voters did do, actually. Do you understand that then, because of that populist message that they both had?
I mean, when you sit down and look at it logically, which is kind of the way my brain is wired, I can't, I like to vote on the issues, and, they were very far apart, clearly on a lot of issues, but they both kind of had that populist tone to their campaigns. So if you look at somebody that's not a politics junkie, that isn't, is barely going to skim, a candidate's website, for president, I can see that. I can see them just listening to Bernie and saying, oh, I like some of the things he's saying, and then listening to Trump and say, oh, I like,
Was it a screw the man kind of situation for either or?
I think it was, yeah. I think it was people just upset and angry. I mean, you look at wage stagnation in this country and what it's been doing, over the past several decades, since the 70s. People are kind of upset about that, and whatever tool they're going to try to use to, whether it's big corporations or big government, they want some stick to hit somebody with. They're just kind of mad. So those messages from Trump and Bernie, that those guys were the stick that they. Either one will do. Just give me something to hit something with, right? Right now politically. So
and now people want sticks more than ever, I think.
Right. Yeah.
I did want to bring up, you're technically a government worker, right?
Right. So we got to be careful. I can't, say what sort of agency I'm with,
right.
because all 6 of the listeners out
He's
there.
He's a spy.
But I think we can safely say I am a government employee. Yes.
And how do you think that's been affected since 2016? I mean, it seems like the breakdown of bureaucracy and sort of the.
It's very interesting. So one thing I have noticed is that government employees really they take their job very seriously. And when you're part of a government agency, you're you're very nonpartisan. So when you're on the clock, you don't have a party. You're supporting your mission, and that's what you do. Those missions come down from, the people in Congress and, the White House, and sometimes you agree with it, sometimes you don't, but it's your job to carry out that mission. So it's been just to kind of, keep the wheels turning. I was kind of astounded because, I was only at my agency for a year when Trump got elected. So, I'm looking around like, what's going to happen? I mean, is this, he's going to slash the federal government to nothing? And are we going to, furloughed forever? What's going to happen? And, I'm looking around at some of the people that have been here for 30 years, and they just kind of like, well, we've survived so far. So a lot of people were just kind of shrugged it off, and like, it's going to be business as usual for the next 4 years. So, some fat and, some programs might get cut and some priorities might get realigned, but in the general sense, I mean, everybody's going to keep their job and nobody's going to go anywhere. I mean, everybody seemed kind of mellow about the whole thing. So just seeing that, I was pretty happy to see it.
What do you think it's going to take to really, what kind of issues need to be talked about here locally to get people to start paying attention to this? More than just, I'm going to always vote for the party I always vote for.
Rights for llamas.
Rights for llamas would be a big one. Voting rights for llamas would be. Yeah.
They need ID though.
I mean, I don't want to go back and play what ifs, but if Bernie, I really feel that if Bernie would have won the nomination, I think he would have had a chance in districts like out here against Trump. I think he would have been a very strong candidate versus where Hillary was kind of, the old guard, and it's politics as usual. And while politics as usual in the Ohio 7th has been red for, God knows when. So I feel like a different message from the Democrats, kind of along the lines of what Bernie had, could stand a real chance out here.
One last question for you then. 2020, who would you want to run? Is it Bernie again, or is there someone else?
It's the Democratic Party's too old, man.
Isn't it?
Like, I love Bernie to death, but he's going to be damn near 80. I mean, when you think by the time he's going to be done with his first term, I mean...
So you're not a Biden guy either, then?
Right. I mean, like, I love Joe Biden. I mean, he's a graduate of Syracuse University, so,
Let's get Hillary back in there one more time.
So I can't...
Pass. Hard pass for me.
But still, I can't... a guy like Biden, I think he'd play really well out here, but... He's old, man. Like,
he's going to be 78 in the next election.
Yeah, I don't think that's viable. I don't think that's a good idea. I think there's a lot of people within the Democratic Party that really like Joe Biden, and that could lead to another issue just like we had between Hillary and Bernie, where a lot of people want to pull the party in a different direction, and we kind of stick with this old guard mentality, and didn't work out so well last time.
It's very true. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Brandon.
Today.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we can ask you, I think what we're going to try to do is come back and talk to you at some point in the future, and see where your head's at as we get closer to 2018 in the next election.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
After having that interview with Brandon and re-listening to it, I took a couple things away from it that I found very interesting. And one of them is the fact that he has become more liberal as this Trump presidency has gone on. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's almost a natural reaction, right? When something extreme happens, the backlash can also be kind of extreme. We saw that when Obama got elected and the whole Tea Party movement. And it's that's one of the problems we're finding now, right? That both sides are going to their extreme bases, and the middle is sort of falling apart.
Well, that's another point that he brought up was hitting things with sticks. Trump is a reaction because they wanted to beat back every other politician that possibly ran. Do you think we have to worry about that as liberal voters, that a liberal Trump could be out there coming in this next presidential election?
There are some concerns. I don't think it's the same type of concern as a Trump-type leader, but one of the things that the left definitely has to be careful of, don't you think, is somebody who riles up popular sentiment and runs with that, and then you're on this sort of runaway train where you have a populist leader who sends a message out, but at the same time has underlying policies that the majority of people don't agree with.
I completely agree with that. I mean, let's look at the quote-unquote fake news that's been going on. During the 2016 presidential election, when you went online, there was literally a lot of fake news about Trump, about Hillary, all this stuff to get clicks. I'm starting to see that now in my news feed passed around by more liberal voters. And I have to worry if that kind of misinformation will, is there because of the anger. Is the anger too much? And I think for good reason it is there. I mean, why else are we doing this podcast? Because we want to flip these districts, right? But Brandon feels like he can't even talk to his neighbors. Like it would be too confrontational. I mean, that means that there's too much anger out there.
Well, that was a really interesting part to me, at least, coming from, I guess, the so-called liberal bubbles, as people say. It normally works the other way around. I mean, people were always like,
well, that's the story we were told. When Trump was elected, there was all these investigations like, what was the Trump voter like? And they were told they felt they couldn't talk.
Yeah, it's almost like people were embarrassed to say they voted for him, but would secretly support him. But Brandon's almost the opposite, right? I mean, he doesn't want to tell people he's not a conservative around.
He didn't want to
area.
put signs in his yard.
It doesn't want to bring it up in conversations necessarily.
But he's very passionate about it.
Yeah, and I guess it's tying all of that together. How do you, in a community like this, express your feelings that you are passionate about, but still maintain that cordiality, which you'd think should be possible, but obviously it's more difficult than we think.
And we don't have all the answers here. But this conversation is not over. In our next episode, we talk to DJ Douglas, who is a conservative voter, and we kind of take him through the same approach. Why does he vote the way he does? Why does he think the way he does? And what does he think will happen in the future?
Thanks so much for listening, and we'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe on iTunes, leave us a review, rate us if you liked us, and you can always follow us at
Only if you liked us.
Only if you liked us. And you can always follow us on Facebook or Twitter at Blue Wave Pod.